Sometimes people use the word miracle in perhaps a silly way. For a miracle, you've got to have something that is divine, something that is spiritual, something that is beyond human comprehension. And as we go through life, we go through miracles, so many that we cease to regard them. At every twist and turn, we are surrounded by miracles. They pervade our life, and we thank God for that.
Peter is one of life's absolute eccentrics.
Eccentric?
Eccentric.
Eccentric.
Bombastic. Ultra intelligent, but I can't make a cup of tea.
He was a character. Friendly, good company.
Peter was a community man, an ambassador for the village.
He was a very sincere Christian and certainly did his parish duties in a good, vigorous fashion.
My grandpa's just always been one of my favourite people, one of my heroes.
Obviously religious, but he was very light-hearted about most things.
I am Lorna de Mello, and Peter Hayward is my grandpa. I decided to make this documentary because I don't really know much about him. He's got so many stories to tell, and intelligence beyond belief, and I really wanted to capture this so it was there forever. I visited loads of different people who knew my grandpa at various times throughout his life, and some of them I'd never even met before. His life is really committed to the Christian faith. From the age of 6, he had a vocation to become a priest, and he's never stopped ever since, despite being 90.
Well, of course, I was really the afterthought of a very big family. My brother Len was almost old enough to be my father. He was 20 years older than me.
His family were heavy drinkers. They saw Dad as a bit of a lightweight, really. I know he told me afterwards and that they'd all have lived longer if they hadn't drunk and smoked so much.
I wasn't a disobedient child or anything like that. And of course, having older brothers and sisters, it meant that I had advantages, really, living with adults like that.
But my goodness, when the Hayward family got together, they'd roar at each other, and pubs used to empty because people couldn't bear the noise because they were so rowdy together.
My brother Sid, he helped me a great deal in my work, and he taught me a huge poem, and I used to recite this, and people would give me money for reciting it.
I think he'd had such a surprise. He'd not really thought about having children.
Richard was born, and he went to visit her in hospital when Richard was born. But before he went to see Joyce and Richard, he went to see another lady who was from the parish, who just had a baby, and he came back. And he said, oh, I've been to see Mrs. So-and-so, and then he had a look in the cot and had a look at Richard and said, oh, Mrs. So-and-so's baby's much better looking baby than this one.
Rosemary came along in 1964. He lifted me up to see Rosemary and he smashed my head against the window. I remember, oh shit, oh bloody hell, from her as she was there with the new baby.
He said to me, he now realises that would have been a huge mistake if he'd never had children. It was the best thing he'd ever done.
I first went to communion when I was a child of 6, 84 years ago. And I think that was the beginning. That was 1932, and I was ordained 18 years later in 1950. But I don't think really I deviated much from that. Basically, I had this vocation from the ministry, as I say, more or less from a child of 6. When I started, I was in lodgings, then came the house in Birmingham, then the vicarage in Birmingham.
Came home from school one day and found this man standing at the door. I could see that he was in his clergy clothes, and he said that Frank Morgan had got in touch with him and that he was told I'd moved into his parish and not to let me go.
Well, I should think when he had the first service in Hutham, and I can remember that, and I can remember Rosemary being at one service when she was only about 6, and she kept saying to her mum, "Oh, this is boring, this has gone on for a long time." Of course, her mum didn't know what to say or what to do or anything.
Father has always been what I suppose in modern terms would describe dyspraxic, or as your gran used to put it, everything but a pen in his hands is a potential dangerous weapon.
In North Cave, I lived in a house that was a Georgian house, a very, very big house.
The North Cave years really were quite idyllic.
Well, I suppose it's the first time I went to church and met him. We got friends and, you know, was friends all the time.
He would do the most strange things. You'd see him up and down the village on his bicycle, pedalling away.
As he was riding the bike, his cassock used to flap.
And I remember my boy James, who must have been about 5 or 6 at the time, Mum, I've got something to tell you. I've just seen God on a bicycle.
A pedal fell off his bicycle once, but he didn't have it replaced. He rode his bike with one pedal, which was all very well until he wanted to go uphill. And then he did seem to lose momentum somewhat.
I know he used to do the mowing when we were at North Cave. So when he was mowing, because the mower made such a lot of noise, he would make noises to drown out the mowing noise. So he'd walk along going, "Roar," as he was mowing.
Peter was in the garden, and when he was mowing the lawn,
He'd got a piece of wood stuck in a petrol mower.
he couldn't get this piece of wood that stuck in the blade. Had this lawnmower on its side with, you know, like petrol dripping down it and things.
So in order to free the piece of wood, he decided.
And he had this candle. And he was kneeling down with a candle, trying to burn this piece of wood out of the machine. And there was flames coming out the side, and I'm thinking, petrol, lawnmower, candle, no!
I believe my brother caught him in time before he blew himself up.
I think God must look after him, because if that had been anybody else, it would have been up in flames.
The thing you've got to remember about is his memory.
He still prays for all the people that he's baptised and buried after all these years.
He was a good servant to the village, really, and, you know, to the church, I thought.
He would always fit it in. He would always squeeze another service in.
That is just incredible.
Probably the last of their sort of vicars.
He sort of helped my faith to become what I am.
The fact that he's so interesting with so many stories.
The most vivid memory I have of him there was him being rowed across the lake at North Cave, and he thought it would make a spectacular entrance.
I got drunk with him once, which was very good.
When he picks up the phone, "Peter Hayward speaking, Reverend Hayward speaking."
You'll just never know it all.
He just sails on, and it's wonderful.
Well, all the curats used to visit us, and so he would visit. Well, he started coming regularly every Monday evening for supper. And, of course, there was a blossoming romance.
In many ways, it seemed an exceedingly unlikely match.
I mean, they were obviously bounced off each other.
Well, she used to square him up.
He'd wind her up and wind her up and wind her up until Gran swore, and then he'd find it so funny, he'd just walk about the house repeating the swears that she said. I think her favourite one was shit, and then he used to wander around going, shit, shit.
Joyce was out in a clear Macintosh coat. Somebody said she was wearing a coat, and she said, well, Peter wouldn't notice if I had nothing underneath it.
Peter was the quiet one, and Joyce was entertaining one.
A good relationship, yeah. You could see they both loved each other.
They lasted not far short of 60 years together.
No, absolutely solid, devoted, fantastic.
I think their relationship is something that everybody should, you know, aspire to be like, really.
She had been out of action for a very long time. She'd long since ceased to shop or to cook. She'd been in hospital for 6 weeks before she died, and so there had been that experience of her not being there. One knows, I know that myself now, that I'm 90. You know that sooner rather or later your life here is going to end. And if someone dies like she did at 92, it isn't the same as if somebody dies younger or anything like that, where you feel that they haven't really had a proper chance.
The reason I did this documentary was to capture an interesting person before they died. I didn't do that with my gran. She was a really inspirational woman. I really regretted the fact that I didn't pull my finger out and get the camera on her before she did die. So this documentary has been really important to me, and to know that my grandpa is now 90 and that he's achieved everything that he wants to achieve and he's still achieving things, it's just amazing.